LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Good morning. It's 3 minutes after 10. I hope you're well today. I don't know whether or not this is a phone-in as opposed to a story, but I'm going to risk it. Okay, so I'm going to need your help. It's not right, is it? And neither is it normal that a Home Secretary who was effectively fired for breaching the ministerial code in fairly egregious terms and then lying about it, that's according to reports that have thus far gone undenied, gets reappointed 6 days later, and then more stories begin to emerge, suggesting that she's receiving security lessons from MI5 over what information she can and cannot share and how to avoid security breaches. I mean, am I going soft in my old age, or is that the sort of thing that you should really have clear before you get appointed to one of the highest offices in the land for the second time? And then, and I should mention that these stories are in the Times and the Daily Mail, and there's another one knocking around as well that I will dig out for you shortly. These are not what you would describe as traditionally negative newspapers towards Conservative politicians, particularly the Daily Mail, of course, which in the last month has pirouetted effortlessly from describing Liz Truss as a sort of second coming and her so-called mini budget as one of the finest things ever to happen to British politics in a generation, to recognising the absolute ridiculousness of her premiership and essentially hastening her departure from Downing Street. But they have this headline: Suella was embroiled in probe over leak that raised concerns at MI5. So there are two stories in the right-wing newspapers today that essentially... Well, no, it's not essentially. There are two stories about the Home Secretary in Conservative supporting newspapers today that both have MI5 in the headline. You'll remember it's not long ago that she was telling you some poor soul in a dinghy in Dover might be a security risk to this country. But here you have an actual Home Secretary featuring in at least two stories wherein MI5 is expressing concerns. Leaky Sue is apparently her nickname. It's trending. It's overtaken Cruella. And Jake Berry, the former chairman of the Conservative Party, admittedly he's just been fired, so he's probably a little bit bitter, a little bit cross, but he said last night on the telly, well, it's sort of the telly, it's one of those weird news stations, but he nevertheless said it on tape: from my own knowledge, there were multiple breaches of the ministerial code. Multiple breaches. And he also explained that Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, had made his view clear that she did not own up to it despite being presented with the evidence. In other words, she sought to finagle and fib her way out of it, off the hook. You'll remember that letter she sent to Liz Truss, essentially describing herself as having made a perfectly innocuous mistake. And on it goes. This is not normal. Andy Sylvester, who is, I think, at City AM, the editor at City AM, who is, I don't know quite how you describe that politically. It went through a very, very strange period when it was pro-Brexit, despite being the newspaper of choice for City slickers, almost all of whom recognise the idiocy of Brexit, of course, except the ones that were poised to make an absolute mint from it. But these days it's a much better proposition, and he is reporting that the Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration, David Neal, says he hasn't met her yet, and only one of the 21 reports he's submitted have been dealt with in the agreed time frame. That's 21 reports within his tenure. That starts in March of 2021. So she wasn't in the Home Office for that entire period, but this covers her entire tenure as Home Secretary, both the last one and the box fresh new one. So she's not even doing the job that she's supposed to be doing. That's three stories for you now, two of which question her security status, her ability to reflect or respect the requirements of the role with regard to leaking, and one of which essentially drives a coach and horses through any claim that she is getting on with other things more important than keeping an eye on what she should and shouldn't be leaking. So here's the thing, okay? 8 minutes after 10 is the time. what I really... I can't ask whether you care or not, but I will just for a moment issue another nod towards footballification, my fairly effective way of explaining why it is that loyalty, political loyalty or tribalism can often give or persuade people to give a free pass to egregious behaviour. This is essentially the thing that Donald Trump said Hillary Clinton should be locked up for, despite the fact, if memory serves, that there was no sort of security service concerns about whatever it was she was up to. And yet it's our Home Secretary. And Rishi Sunak must have known about some of this. We touched yesterday on the Sunday Times report that detailed fairly thoroughly the case that she'd fibbed, the case that she had behaved abominably, egregiously, and then lied about it. That's according to the Sunday Times reports, which, I means I add a reportedly or an allegedly. But yesterday, when Keir Starmer asked Rishi Sunak whether or not officials had expressed concerns, do you remember that point? Have officials expressed concerns about the Home Secretary's conduct? And Rishi Sunak, he didn't answer any questions at PMQs yesterday. You'd have to turn to the Daily Mail this morning to find a positive account of that bizarre exchange where Keir Starmer asked quite important questions that we would all like to hear the answers to, and Rishi Sunak banged on about Jeremy Corbyn and North London. He categorically didn't deny or indeed answer at all the question about whether or not the security services have expressed concerns about the current Home Secretary. What? So the reason I mentioned 6 or 7 minutes ago that I don't know if there's a phone in here, but I think we should at least try, is because there's no obvious question to ask. If I ask you whether you care, that's just a bit woolly, isn't it? How big a deal is this, is what I asked Theo Usherwood this morning. And we're both of the view that it is a big deal. Questions being asked at the lobby today about whether or not there would have been a sort of ethics inquiry into Suella Braverman that came back with a negative result that Rishi Sunak then elected to ignore, just as Boris Johnson ignored concerns expressed about some of the people he wanted to put into the House of Lords, and indeed the report from his own independent ethics advisor that found Suella Braverman's predecessor in the Home Office, Priti Patel, had been a bully, a conduct that cost an awful lot of taxpayers' money in compensation. So 11 minutes after 10 is the time. I'm not being lazy. I'm not being unprofessional when I struggle to come up with a question. Sometimes when I describe to you why I think a story is really important, a question presents itself that you can then respond to, and we can move into more traditional phone-in territory. So let's just do it then. Suella was embroiled in probe over leak that raised concerns at MI5. MI5 security lessons for Leaky Sue. Independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration says he's yet to meet her, and only one of 21 reports he's submitted have been dealt with in the agreed time frame. Caroline Noakes, former Conservative minister, I think, definitely a Conservative MP, has told the BBC that there were big questions hanging over the issue and called for a full inquiry. That's a Conservative MP, I stress. Former Tory party chairman Jake Berry said her breaches had been multiple and serious. And then Nadeem Zahawi pops up this morning. We need a new nickname for him, don't we? Flip-Flop Zahawi or something like that, who apparently was on the phone to the Daily Telegraph begging them to take down the article he'd written about why Boris 2.0 was going to be a brilliant Prime Minister. And there's sort of about 96 seconds elapsed between that piece appearing on the Telegraph website and Boris Johnson chucking all of his supporters under the bus by pulling out of the leadership battle. So Zahawi's doing how can you take Nadeem Zahawi seriously? This is a man who goes, I support Boris Johnson, I support I support Suella Braverman, I support Rishi Sunak. Just ridiculous. These people are like weather vanes. But he's got himself a job as party chairman, and he said that the Prime Minister has looked at this case and decided to give her a second chance. He then starts talking about redemption, which is just weird. In the context of national security, I'm not sure there should be any context of redemption. What are we going to do next? Give a pardon to Burgess, Philby and McLean? So, those are your 3 stories. Those are your 4 stories. Suella was embroiled in probe over leak that raised concerns at MI5. MI5 security lessons for Leaky Sue. 2 Conservative MPs have questioned the reappointment of Suella Braverman as Home Secretary. One of them, a former Tory party chairman, has said that her breaches had been multiple and serious. That certainly ties in with Tim Shipman's report on Sunday in the Sunday Times, suggesting that this was far from exceptional conduct, and yet she is still there. Final piece of the jigsaw this morning is that my colleague Ben Kentish, who's standing in for Tom Swarbrick on Drive Time this week, has pointed out that it's not as if she actually brings that much to the party anyway. I know she's a luminary of the so-called ERG, and it may have been that Rishi Sunak agreed to give her a massive job in return for her publicly coming out in support of him on Sunday afternoon. But I don't know that she actually carries that much weight or that much heft. Her disgusting comments about refugees, of course, play extremely well with a certain part of the Conservative Party. Dreaming about deporting innocent people is, it strikes you and me as repellent, but there are plenty of people out there who love that kind of thing. The kind of people who are, going down to Dover with their Fisher-Price binoculars and rubbing their thighs at the thought of people drowning. She dreams about deporting them to Rwanda. So, she's got that level of support, but there aren't many of them, I don't think, in the Conservative Parliamentary Party. So, why is Rishi Sunak standing by Leaky Sue? 0345 6060 973. And I'll take any answer you've got to that question. If you have some understanding of these issues due to your own past, if you have worked in the civil service or even perhaps in the security services, then I'd put you to the front of the queue on my switchboard this morning. But the first question I would ask you is this: why is Rishi Sunak, mere hours after talking about his commitment to professionalism, accountability and integrity, why is he standing by Leaky Sue? 0345 6060 973. And the second question is this, and this is an invitation to you to help me out a bit. Why does this matter? Why does this matter? You could portray it in fact, she tried to portray it in relatively trivial terms. Oh, I accidentally did this and I pressed that and I did this. The more you read into it, the more you realise she was effectively, reportedly, running potential government policy by a particularly pungent backbencher with a long track record of having a kind of UKIP-y approach to immigration. And that is from the heart of the Home Office, if the sources that spoke to Tim Shipman are to be believed, or indeed if the former party chairman, Jake Berry, is to be believed. So here is your second question. How big a deal is this? Does this matter to you? And if so, why? And if not, why not? All welcome, okay? It's 16 minutes after 10. The phone lines are open. That's it. For question one, why is Rishi Sunak standing by Leaky Sue? Why is he putting so much on the line for her, reputationally, so early in a premiership that we naively believed was going to involve a resurrection of integrity, accountability and professionalism? He's essentially waved goodbye to the most impressive platform of his debut speech on day one as Prime Minister. And he's done it all for her, for Leaky Sue. Why? That's question number one. Question number two is, why does it matter? 10:16 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. The number you need is 0345 6060 973.
60973.
Even if you were to be supportive of Sunak, what you've got today trending in this country, and these are the news trends, not the ones that are tailored to my own feed. I sometimes have to check. You've got Leaky Sue, you've got Attorney General, you've got Ministerial Code already. What's he been in the job for 2 days? And one of his most senior lieutenants, the actual Home Secretary, reappointed 6 days after being sacked for security breaches, is at the centre of yet more stories about alleged miscreants. I don't get it. Why has he done it? And how big a deal is it? Harrison's in South Devon. Harrison, what would you like to say?
I don't see how this can't be a big deal.
No, nor do I.
This, for me, if it was Liz Truss that had done this, she would have probably lost to that cabbage the lettuce even sooner. I think what it shows is, again, just a complete contempt for the rules.
Well, Liz Truss got everything wrong except that. She got everything wrong except sacking someone for a major lapse of security. And Rishi Sunak has reappointed her.
Our Home Secretary can't be trusted with important documents that pertain to the security of our own country.
It's a mad headline.
Unreal.
MI5 will give Suella Braverman lessons on what information she can and cannot share and how to avoid security breaches, the Times has learned. Why is she in the job?
I think that the reason that she's in the job is because she ticks the boxes for the sound bites that she allows the right-wing Twitter accounts to.
And I mean, here's John Redwood this morning. We need a strong-minded, good lawyer as Home Secretary to stop people trafficking and the illegal small boats. Suella Braverman is the best equipped to do this, to save lives and control our borders. So that proves your point in a way. It doesn't matter if she's a security breach. It doesn't matter if MI5 have got concerns about her. It doesn't matter if a former Tory party chairman has described her breaches as multiple and serious. If the dinghy fetishists think that she's a winner, then that's good enough for Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, that at the end of it is all that matters. I think it's infuriating because I grew up being told if I followed the rules, if I did well in school, if I told the truth, if I treated people fairly, if I treated people with respect, if I didn't get fixed penalty notices from the police, I was told that I would do well in life, that I would have a good job, that I would be successful. And I'm sat here not knowing how I'm going to feed my kids in a few days. Yeah. And then we've got liars and criminals in Westminster who just think this is all a big joke. And it shows the complete contempt they have for the general public, that they don't need to follow the same rules that we do. I work in a company that deals with GDPR often. If I broke GDPR rules,
this is data protection,
I would lose my job.
Data protection.
Yeah, it's data protection. So if I broke data protection rules,
yes,
I would be on my bottom, and I would be told, goodbye, you broke the
sandwiches
rules.
wrapped in a roadmap time. Do you need lessons?
6 days later, I wouldn't be rehired.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? And you'd have Nadeem Zahawi talking about redemption and John Redwood saying, are they attacking the Home Secretary because they do not want her to control our borders? And you have to check.
Do they not realise that this isn't a joke? This is her job, and she failed at her job. She broke the rules. She sent private and confidential emails through her private email address. That is massive. If I forwarded customer details on to myself and sent them to my mate and his wife, I would get sacked. And I would probably have the police investigating me for breaches in data protection.
Yeah,
what is going on?
I think you're right.
Why do they not play by the same rules as us?
Well, I know the answer. I know the answer to
that.
Well, I know the answer to that bit. They don't play by the same rules as us because they don't respect them, and they can get away with it. They keep getting away with it because they can. Oh, that's why I was surprised today to see the Mail really going in hard on a story from when she was Attorney General. And I have to check the blue tick on John Redwood because you'd think that was a joke, right? That would be one of those parody accounts. Are they attacking the Home Secretary because they do not want her to control our borders? Yeah, the Daily Mail are really big on that, Redders. You know, you can always rely on the Daily Mail to be angry with people who are wanging on about immigration and controlling our borders all the time. The Daily Mail, that paragon of Christian values that was always, remembering the parable of the Good Samaritan and treating everybody equitably and fairly wherever it is that they hail from. Good old Daily Mail really got a problem with the Home Secretary who says vile things about refugees, you silly old man. Are they attacking the Home Secretary because they do not want her to control our borders? No, they're attacking the Home Secretary because she's embroiled in a probe over a leak that raised concerns at MI5, because she's needing lessons from MI5 on what she can and can't actually share with other people, and because the head of the Border Service, who you apparently would be expected to care about, has revealed he hasn't had a single meeting with her yet, and only one of the 21 reports he submitted in his tenure in that job, although not all of it coincides with her tenure in her job. Only 1 out of 21 reports have been dealt with in the agreed time frame. So she's not doing any of that either, Redders. Thank you, Harrison. Matthew's in Eaglescliff. Matthew, what would you like to say?
It's a similar point to the previous gentleman, really. As a civil servant, if you were to leak information, or if you accidentally emailed it, let's say, or on purpose to your own email address, you would be out and there would be no avenue back.
Is that right?
And it's absolutely, because you are given very strict instructions. You are dealing with highly sensitive information sometimes, be it information about policy or a member of the public or something broader. And if you were to accidentally email it, there might be a conversation. But to willingly send it, which is what the reports say, there would be no avenue of recourse. It doesn't matter if you fell on your sword, you would be out.
And you're focusing on the one that she was essentially done for, the one that she was caught sharing, largely because she accidentally sent it to the wrong person. She was trying to send it to the wife of an MP as well as an actual MP, but she sent it to the aide of a different MP who presumably has a similar name, and that MP took it to the chief whip, who took it to the cabinet secretary, who took it to the cleaners. 6 days later, she's back in her job. But Jake Berry's intervention last night, the former Tory party chairman, suggests that was, the tip of the iceberg. The phrase multiple and serious is used to describe her breaches. I can't quite believe this, actually, and I sense you can't either.
No, and even one is enough, but to hear that there are more, potentially, we don't need training on how not to share information that is absolutely imperative that it remains private. There is no one in all my tenure as a civil servant who I know has ever done this, ever.
Well,
and I've been involved in investigations myself.
A technical infringement of the rules, she called it. A technical infringement of the rules. That's just not true, is it?
It's not true at all. It's appalling. And again, it stinks of the overall view that we're seeing is that people are not accountable as ministers for what they do. And if we can't hold them to account, how on earth can we expect them to act in a way that is best for us as a country?
That's a really good point. And I, very, very naively, for 10 minutes on Tuesday, I thought Rishi Sunak really was going to be focusing upon integrity and accountability and professionalism. I thought it was a very deliberate departure from what had gone before. I had this image of him, albeit going along with some of Johnson's most egregious conduct, this image of him sitting in Downing Street, hating it, really think this is awful, but I'm better on the inside than I am on the outside. I can mitigate some of the awfulness. I can alleviate some of the bad things he's doing from the inside. I can't do it from the outside. Whatever justifications he came up with for staying on board the Boris Johnson bandwagon, I had this image of him sitting there despising it and actually thinking it was disgraceful and thinking it was wrong, which is why I still don't understand why on his first day in the job, he signed up to the Boris Johnson school of unaccountability, absence of integrity and base unprofessionalism. I don't get it.
It's bizarre.
It is,
you
isn't
cannot
it?
say trust is earned and then rehire somebody who's stepped over the mark in such a huge and evidenced way. It is absolutely bizarre.
Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
10:35 is the time. Mark Pritchard is also a Conservative Member of Parliament and a former member of the Intelligence and Security Committee. Actually, I don't know if he's former or not on that one, but anyway, he's involved in matters military and security for many years. He's tweeted this morning, MI5 need to have confidence in the Home Secretary, whoever that might be. It's a vital relationship of trust, key to the UK's security and democratic oversight of MI5. Any breakdown in that relationship is bad for the security service and the government. It needs to be sorted ASAP. So there are two hares running on the programme this morning. One of them is the politics of it and the other one is the security of it. So how big a deal is this? Interesting to hear from a civil servant and indeed from someone who works in data protection that if they were to have been caught doing what Suella Braverman has, according to the former Tory party chairman Jake Berry, done multiple times, their feet would not touch the ground. They certainly wouldn't be brought back into the job 6 days later. That's the security angle. How big a deal is this? The political story, the political hare that's running this morning is, why has Rishi Sunak staked so much on Suella Braverman, or Leaky Sue, as she will now be forever known? Leaky Sue at the heart of the Home Office. Why has he done this? I'll take answers to either of those questions, and indeed any contributions that don't directly address either of the questions I've asked, but which you consider to be pertinent on 0345 6060 973. I hadn't spotted that. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. Another Conservative MP. I mean, it's a measured tweet from Mark Pritchard. He's not demanding resignations or anything like that. I don't think anyone's going to go as far as Jake Berry did last night, the former Tory party chairman who has described it as multiple and serious. I may play you that in a moment after we hear from Paul, who's in Northampton. Paul, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
My background, I'm a retired police officer, and for the last 6 years I was a detective constable on the counter-terrorism unit.
Okay.
In relation to Suella Braverman and what she's done, that is basically a national security risk. If Rishi Sunak is allowing that to carry on, then the political expediency for him is actually putting the country at a national security risk. For Nadine Zahawi to go the rounds this morning, basically saying everybody can make a mistake and we should move on, is a joke. In counter-terrorism, you cannot afford to make a mistake. Now, I'll explain the processes of what actually happened. I was obviously a police officer for 24 years, so I had access to what's called confidential information. When I applied to be a detective constable on the counter-terrorism unit, and I was successful, I had to go through what's called a vetting process, which took 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Looked at my background. They asked things like, have you had any affairs? And these sort of things. You can't be open to blackmail, etc. That only allowed me access to secret documents. The Home Secretary would be allowed to top secret, way above my level. Now, when I was working in counter-terrorism, there were 2 computer systems we would use. One would be purely secret for putting in reports, intelligence reports and documentation and getting things flagged up to you, which would feed into MI6, MI5, Home Office and various other departments. We would then have what's called the Police Office Infrastructure System,
Right.
which none of the secret documents or top secret documents would go on, because that would only be at a confidential level.
Okay.
And then obviously I would have my own personal email address, which the allegation is Suella Braverman has used her own personal email address. If I had released or emailed a secret document when I was in that department and I'd been found out, the first thing that would happen was I would have been taken off that department and moved back into uniform.
Right.
There would have been a major investigation, and there would probably be more than a 90% chance I would be kicked out of the police.
And yet she's back after 6 days? It is just bizarre.
Lose my pension. Yeah, lose my pension. Simple as that.
I don't know that the stuff she has shared, I don't know the details of what Jake Berry describes as multiple and serious. So if we were to swap the word sensitive for secret, what changes?
Yeah, but you are still breaching your position of trust, and you're breaching the Official Secrets Act.
So you've got MI5 reportedly giving her lessons on what she can and can't share with other people. And you've got Yvette Cooper, her shadow, asking in the House yesterday what her security clearance status is now. And you've got Keir Starmer asking Rishi Sunak whether or not officials have expressed concerns about her conduct. And in the absence of any denials or refutations, we can fairly confidently conclude what the answers to those questions actually are. And she's sitting in the heart of the Home Office.
Yeah, these are people that were at the heart of government dealing with sensitive, secret, top secret information, and you cannot afford to be unprofessional or make mistakes. Now, when things came into our department and they were classed as top secret, I wouldn't get access to that because it would be vetted, and if it was top secret, my clearance would only be up to secret.
We need to see
and even if we had investigations I had party to,
yes,
and I could view those secret documents, people would say to me, why are you viewing that document? Even though it's not part of my investigation, because it's so. And if I took a secret document out of the office to go and show it to the chief constable,
yeah,
I had to print it off. I had to log it that I printed it off. I had to put it into a metal briefcase that was locked, that was strapped to my wrist. I could walk it over to the chief constable. I would then get him to view the document. I would then get him to sign it. I would then get him to countersign that he'd seen that and given the document back to me. I would have to bring it back again, and then somebody would have to witness me shredding that document, and the shredders were at a higher level to make sure there wasn't a breach. Absolutely
fascinating. Whereas she just emailed cabinet papers from her ministerial account to her private Gmail account and then sent them on to the immigrant hating Sir John Hayes, a fellow right-winger, and accidentally copied in someone she thought was Hayes' wife, but was actually an assistant to the MP for Brigg and Goole, Andrew Percy. Paul, thank you. I mean, I don't know what a caller would sound like if they wanted to ring in and say, calm down, dear, none of this matters, because I'm looking at Conservative MPs speaking in terms, and I'm looking at right-wing newspapers publishing headlines like MI5 security lessons for Leaky Sue. Here's some actual footage of the very recently Tory party chairman Jake Berry describing, and the crucial words here, as you'll pick up, are multiple and serious.
6 days is a long time in politics. It's for the new Prime Minister, and he must be free to appoint whoever he wants. But look, what I would say is, from my own knowledge, there were multiple breaches of the ministerial code. It was sent from a private email address to another member of Parliament. She then sought to copy that individual's wife and accidentally sent it to a staffer in Parliament. To me, that seems a really serious breach, especially when it was documents relating to cybersecurity, as I believe. That seems a really serious breach. The Cabinet Secretary had his say at the time. I doubt he's changed his mind in the last 6 days. I wasn't in the meeting, but as I understand it, the evidence was put to her and she accepted the evidence rather than the other way around.
Wow. Theo Ashwood is here.
Yes, because we've got another day of questions in the House of Commons about this particular issue. Oliver Dowden, the Cabinet Office Minister, is taking questions from MPs. Chris Bryant, who of course is the chairman of the Standards Committee, has been making the point that Suella Braverman's conduct would have come to the attention of none other than Vladimir Putin.
One of the things that Putin does is he and his team target individual politicians in this country. How safe is it, therefore, for the Home Secretary to have been using a separate and unsecure email address? Doesn't that need to be addressed?
He will have heard the Prime Minister and indeed my Right Honourable friend, the Paymaster General, addressing exactly this point, but I'm happy to reiterate to him that the Home Secretary accepted that in her conduct she did make errors of judgment. She recognised that, she accepted her mistake, and she apologised and she resigned. And I think that that was an appropriate course of action.
So Oliver Dowden is saying nothing to see here. However, this story has got legs. It's going to continue because what Labour is trying to do now is to get hold of the private written advice from the Cabinet Secretary, Simon Case, which would include, James, any concerns that the security services have, and get that into the public domain. Now, from what we're told, and this is, of course, reporting down to Tim Shipman at the Sunday Times, is that we believe Simon Case was livid at the Rishi Sunak reappointed Suella Braverman after 6 days as the Home Secretary. But we haven't seen that written advice. Angela Rayner, the Labour front bench Shadow Cabinet Office Minister, is calling for the publication of that advice. But Oliver Dowden, for the moment, is saying no.
Once again, to restate to the Right Honourable Lady, the Home Secretary did accept that in her conduct she made errors of judgment. That's why she resigned. Of course, the Prime Minister, on appointing her, sought assurances to ensure that that would not happen again. In respect of private advice given by the Cabinet Secretary to the Prime Minister on making appointments, it has never been the case under any administration that advice is made public.
Well, I mean, they're defending the indefensible on day 2. I bet people like Dowden thought he was going to get a slightly different brief when he returned to the front bench of British politics.
Of course, James, there is, and you'll remember this from the heady days of Brexit, the use of what's known as a humble address to try and force the government to release documents that it doesn't want to release.
Like its own forecasts on what the economic damage would be as a consequence of Brexit.
That's the one.
Its own forecast.
So next Wednesday, Labour don't have the Opposition Day debate. That's over to the SNP. But the Wednesday after, they'll get that back. So if Suella Braverman is still in post in 2 weeks' time, or a little under 2 weeks' time, then you can expect Labour to try and use parliamentary procedure to force the Prime Minister to release the advice that he received from Simon Case, his most senior civil servant, right-hand man, as to whether he should reappoint Suella Braverman as Home Secretary.
There is a curious collection of characters going after her now. Mark Pritchard, Conservative MP, has tweeted this morning. Jake Berry's intervention last night was remarkable. Caroline Noakes, of course, told the BBC that there were big questions hanging over the issue and called for a full inquiry. And perhaps most pertinently, page 5 of the Daily Mail today features headlines I wouldn't have expected to see so early in Sunak's administration. Suella was embroiled in probe over leak that raised concerns at MI5. This referring back to reports that she was seeking to get an injunction placed on the BBC to prevent them from reporting on a certain story, and the profound concerns about what happened there, leading to an investigation by the Government Security Group, a little publicised unit within the Cabinet Office. I mentioned the different identities of these critics because momentum is achieved.
And I was speaking to a fairly senior source of mine who was making the point that Suella Braverman would have to, like every other cabinet minister who has ever appointed, go through a propriety and ethics test to make sure that there's nothing on that she has done that could embarrass the government in future. It's not clear, my source was telling me, about whether Suella Braverman has gone through that test for her reappointment to Home Secretary. And if she has gone through that test, what did it find? And has Rishi Sunak overruled the findings of that test? Were they to be to go against the fact that he should reappoint her into such a sensitive position in the government? And has he gone against that? And if he has gone against that, why has he gone against that? And what is the justification for going against that advice?
And if there was nothing to hide, there'd be nothing to fear from publishing that sort of...
And you would assume if there was nothing to hide, Simon Case would have had no concerns. He would have given the reappointment of Suella Braverman a clean bill of health, and that they could just simply publish those details as a matter of through a written statement to the House of Commons.
It's not going away, is it?
No.
It is 10:48.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
10:53 is the time. I like this. As a former intelligence analyst in the RAF, if I had made multiple security breaches intentionally, then not only would I have lost my security clearance, I would have ended up in Colchester military prison, followed by a discharge. There'd be no offer of re-education, no sin bin for 6 days, no room for apologies. I'd be escorted from my office by the military police, and my feet wouldn't have touched the ground till I got to Colchester. I don't know that what she's done is directly comparable with what Jim describes, but the gravity of the situation is what makes Rishi Sunak's conduct so mysterious. Well, except it isn't, is it? And we'll explain what has almost certainly gone on here shortly before 11 o'clock. First, though, Tim's in Scunthorpe. Tim, what would you like to say?
Hey, hi.
Hello, mate.
Morning, James. The word I want to bring into the conversation is that of effect.
Yeah.
And it's a double-edged sword, this, when it comes to what is essentially a data or a intelligence breach, and in this case, it's intelligence. So what I want to say is, right, look, there's a lot of really, really brave people out there in the world that are doing good for our country and to preserve the way of life we live and what have you, in security services. And what I'm saying is it's a double-edged sword, because whilst we are concerned about the way in which that could affect their role and possibly endanger their lives, I think the decision by Rishi is also a big concern for me, because have we thought about the effect upon the individual who's basically made the breach? Because that person has just made themselves extremely vulnerable and to blackmail and what have you. So the issue about, I agree with the issue about self-resignation. That should have been an instant, but there should be some advisors now, and I imagine that Richie's really bogged down with all the other plethora of issues.
There's a lot on his desk, certainly.
Yeah, but the point is, this should be, hang on a minute, you need to deal with this one. We've got the situation. You've just appointed this man. This person has committed a data breach. It's serious. It's still being investigated. And you've got a duty of care, Prime Minister, over this member of staff who you've just appointed, because that person is now extremely vulnerable to blackmail. And
the Home Secretary is responsible for signing off surveillance warrants and other highly classified functions of Britain's spy agencies, as well as for the UK's counter-terrorism policy.
Well, exactly that. And when we talk about effects, I know I've experienced the wrong information, the wrong intelligence coming through, and that cost myself, five of my colleagues were killed. I worked in the military during the Troubles in Northern Ireland, so I know what it's like to be on the forefront of that, and it is a serious matter. But I just want to raise something else as well. If you've got a very, very serious, heavy piece of intelligence that you release, it might only have a small effect. This is why I say effect. However, don't take for granted, James, the issue, all of us, that if it's a minor breach and we apologise, that could still be the catalyst in a series of information which leads to a massive effect detrimental to health and safety. So intelligence breaches, that's why legislation's there, and we've got to follow it. But I do think it's a poor error of judgment on Rich's part to put this Member of Parliament back into a position where they're extremely vulnerable, and the level and degree of intelligence that person will be seeing undoubtedly, I wouldn't want to think again that I had people dealing with the intelligence were coming to me for me to perform what I did over there, and it's cost me my career and my mental health.
I'm sorry.
You
want to have complete confidence in the chain of command. That's the best way of putting it. And she was sending it to someone's wife. I mean, these documents were not anywhere near as sensitive of the ones that you've been talking about, but it's a matter of principle, isn't it? And sending it to someone's wife and accidentally sending it to somebody else, not even, I didn't beggars belief. And in fact, relevant to some of what you said, another thing Jake Berry said last night was that it included documents on cyber security that she is, for reasons that I don't understand, sending to colleagues. And indeed, well, you could say the world and his wife, except she didn't send it to his wife. She accidentally sent it to somebody else entirely. Thank you, Tim. I'm sorry to hear about your own struggles. I think what happened, I mean, there's some statements of the bleeding obvious here. Actually, let's squeeze in Anthony first. He's in Bletchley Park, which is geographically appropriate. Anthony, what would you like to say?
Morning.
Hello.
One of the reasons it also matters is this isn't just a domestic issue. Our allies are going to be far less comfortable trusting UK ministers from the top down with classified information. If our allies, especially the Americans, already the Five Eyes, think that Prime Minister Sunak's made a bad call on Braverman, they're going to really worry he's going to make other bad calls.
I'm going to worry that something that crosses her desk could be sent to someone that she just fancies sharing it with.
Absolutely. If you focus in on one of the issues which has come up time and again, this issue of immigration, essentially, to counter illegal immigration, it's got to be an intelligence-led operation, which involves a multi-agency, multinational approach. But under Boris Patel Hey, I'm on the radio. Shush.
Yeah, shush.
But under Patel,
shush.
Under Patel and Braverman, it's...
I don't think this is going to work. I think you've been nobbled.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. We'll talk again soon. That was an interesting intervention from an alleged dog there at a crucial point in our exchange with Anthony. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I want to talk a little bit about what I think happened, because on Sunday, Braverman's support for Sunak, as Bennett Kentish has pointed out, wasn't that significant. But I think actually her withdrawal of support, or her failure to support Boris Johnson, probably was. I wonder whether he'd refused to reappoint her. It seems unlikely, but that was... So it's not just about what she brought to Sunak, which should just be a few shop-soiled members of the ERG, really, and little Marquis Francois couldn't even guarantee that. But it's what she took away from Johnson. One of the most toxic right-wing members of the government not supporting Boris Johnson was probably more significant than supporting Rishi Sunak.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 11 o'clock, the Conservative Party chairman Nadhim Zahawi has refused to rule out an additional windfall tax on oil and gas giants. This morning, Shell has reported profits of £8.2 billion for the third quarter, more than double the profits from the same period last year. City editor at the Daily Mail, Alex Brummers, told LBC those profits may be important to the UK's growth.
Those who believe in the green agenda should actually support them, because they are some of the biggest investors in green technologies. Shell has bought a huge chain right across the country of electric points, and it's improving them all over the country. We need those if we're going to have electric cars.
Metro mayors are holding an emergency meeting to discuss what they call the shambles affecting rail services across the north of England. Weeks of disruption has seen hundreds of services cancelled by a number of rail operators. They're expected to make a direct plea to the new Transport Secretary Mark Harper to intervene. Australia has become the first football team to openly criticise Qatar's human rights record ahead of this winter's World Cup. In a collective video message released by Football Australia, 16 players also call for the decriminalisation of homosexuality in the country. In the UK, the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly has been criticised for telling LGBT fans to make some compromises when they're visiting Qatar for the tournament. But in contrast, the Tory party chairman Nadeem Zahawi's told LBC the UK doesn't share the policies of Qatar and everyone should feel free to be themselves.
You should not compromise on your identity or your sexuality or your sexual preference in any way. And of course, you are safe to go to the World Cup. But football is a celebration of diversity. And I'm sure the Qataris completely understand that as well.
President Volodymyr Zelensky has publicly thanked the Ukraine's power workers for maintaining the electricity supply as Russia continues to target energy infrastructure ahead of the winter. Authorities have ordered rolling blackouts in many parts of the country and asked households to limit consumption. Lloyds Banking Group says it's preparing for a downturn in the UK's property market and a rise in unpaid loans. It's downgraded its forecasts and now predicts the economy will shrink 1% next year and house prices will fall 8%. In the city a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading up 17 points at 70.73. The pound buys $1.15 and €1.15. The weather, outbreaks of rain moving north but becoming brighter with some sunny spells developing this afternoon in the south. Windy in the far north, very mild, especially in the southeast, a high of 20 Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Holly Harris.
Rising energy costs are a big worry. Carbon emissions too. That's why EDF is helping build Britain's wind, nuclear and solar energy supply to help prevent energy crises and keep future costs down. Plus, we're the biggest generator of zero-carbon electricity right here in Britain. Find out more about our zero-carbon generation at edfenergy.com/helpingbritain.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I turn your attention next to a different story, a completely different story, which bizarrely, given that we had a fascinating conversation yesterday about how some fairly unpleasant people are trying to introduce the word globalist into British political vocabulary, a connotation, a deeply anti-Semitic connotation, but as we discussed yesterday, extending beyond the myth of super rich Jewish people controlling the world and extending to super rich people who aren't necessarily Jewish controlling the world. Some people referring even to Rishi Sunak as a globalist. David Aranovich has written a brilliant piece for the Jewish Chronicle, actually, that I'll share with you shortly if you follow me on Twitter. So I love, I don't know why. It's probably because I'm pathetic. I love it when we do something on the show and then the newspapers the next day do something that adds a new layer to it or adds a new dimension to it. Because we talked about how it all seemed to be linked together, didn't we? We spoke to some very expert contributors, callers, who talked of how believing, for example, in QAnon conspiracy theory or some COVID-19 conspiracy theories often went hand in hand with this introduction of the word globalist to political discourse. The people who believed that the COVID-19 was a hoax also believe that there is a secret cabal of people, whether they're Jewish or not, who are trying to take over the world for reasons that they can't really explain, but are definitely linked to the World Economic Forum. I did speak to one of my mates yesterday who works for the World Economic Forum, and I said, no offence, but if your lot are really trying to take over the world, how the hell did you get a job there? And he completely agreed with me. So this conspiracy osmosis is what intrigues me most, because The Times publishes a story today by its rather excellent science editor about a study that has found that the pandemic may have acted as a gateway into inducting people into a world of eccentric beliefs. One of the authors of the study from the University of Pennsylvania said, once you start thinking that the government has lied to you about COVID, that violates your trust and you start to wonder what else they have lied to you about. It's really interesting. He became interested in conspiracy theories after researching online forums where people discuss how they came to their beliefs. And before COVID, it would be the 9/11 attacks as the impetus that brought them into this weird world. After COVID, it's kind of overtaken other conspiracies as your gateway drug for believing all manners of bilge. They got exposed, he writes, Javier Granados Samayoa. They got exposed to a variety of theories that ultimately led them down the rabbit hole, where they discussed anything ranging from aliens to the latest political conspiracy theory. And I thought today it might be nice to return to some territory that we found incredibly fertile during lockdowns and during the coronavirus crisis, which is not over, by the way. I had my latest booster jab yesterday, and I'm feeling a little bit crook as a consequence of that. That's why I'm not my usual bright-eyed, bushy-tailed self. I don't know if you've picked up on that yet, but I'm a very brave little soldier, and I didn't feel it would be fair for you to be deprived of me today by me staying in bed, tempting though it was. So thank you. Yes, you're very welcome. So we found the best way into this was not to speak to the poor souls who've fallen down these holes, but to speak to people who care about them. And I'd like to do that again today with your help. I'd like you to talk me through how someone you love has gone down a multiple rabbit hole, a rabbit warren of conspiracy theories, particularly if it began with coronavirus. Because as this study very persuasively suggests, once you start thinking the government has lied to you about COVID, your trust is so violated that you could pretty much believe anything. You start to wonder what else you might have been lied to about. And the idea that governments, or indeed a new world order or a world government, is somehow seeking to pull the strings of society for reasons, for very important reasons, is obviously ridiculous. And yet it's obviously seductive as well. So it's 8 minutes after 11. I just want you to talk to me about what happened to someone you care about. 0345 606 0973. If they started off flirting with coronavirus conspiracy theories, where are they now? So your mate, your best mate, perhaps your partner. We took some very poignant calls last year from people whose partners had fallen down these rabbit holes. What I'm interested in today is, where do you go next? Where do you go after the rabbit hole? What other conspiracies have your loved ones bought into as a consequence of having their trust broken by people telling lies about COVID on Facebook or wherever it may be, in chat rooms, on various internet portals? Here are the numbers now. You will get through. 0345 6060 973. The way they put it is like this. Believing COVID-19 conspiracy theories seems to open up your mind to other conspiracy theories. It doesn't actually mean that they are conspiracists themselves, that they're sort of best viewed as being somewhere on a spectrum. And I just want to work out where your loved one is on this spectrum. So they started off, do you remember when we first started coming across it? People claiming that first of all, that the whole thing was a hoax, even as the death toll was rocketing, and those pictures coming in from Italy in the earliest days, do you remember, in the hospitals? And then all sorts of conspiracies springing up around the vaccines. Occasionally, perhaps, you came across a well-meaning person who just didn't understand what they were talking about. But a lot of the prominent people in this kind of field quite a lot of them were failed broadcasters. It was as if they discovered a new way, or very low-level broadcasters who had discovered a kind of new way of attracting attention. You've got to be a show-off to do this job. But those of us who are good at it will attract attention by doing our job well. If you're not that good at it, you can attract attention by doing it appallingly, by punting all manner of vaccine conspiracy or COVID nonsense. So that happened as well. Some politicians, or quotes, politicians, end quotes, got involved in it as well. But I'm interested in where it leads. And I'm interested in where your loved one has gone after falling initially down the rabbit hole of COVID. Okay? So hit the numbers now. You will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. So, I mean, just some little examples on the claims. I mean, one of the popular claims is that you can prove that the vaccine is a con because you can still get COVID even if you've been vaccinated, and you can still pass it on if you've got it even if you've been vaccinated, that's what I mean by some of them perhaps being well-meaning but just not fully understanding what's going on. The key point of the vaccine, was to reduce the likelihood of you being seriously ill in the event of catching it, even more than immunising it from it. The key point was to reduce, I mean, best case scenario, nobody gets it. Second best case scenario, everybody who gets it doesn't get hospitalised or die. So much a failure of public information, really. I don't understand why, looking back. But the problem, of course, is you've got Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance telling safe, comfortable, unremarkable truths, and then you've got some numpty on your Facebook page screaming all sorts of blue bloody murder from the top of the mountaintops, and inevitably it will attract the attention of people. People you are surprised by. People you are shocked to see actually falling into this rabbit hole because you know them really well and you love them, and you thought, oh, well, it'll just be a phase, it'll just be brief. But now, with a little bit more time on the clock, you see your loved one not coming back into the light, but falling ever further into the darkness and peeling off down different burrows, and believing now, as a consequence of having that trust broken by lies about COVID-19, you know, do you think COVID-19 is a bioweapon released by sinister forces to further nefarious agendas? Remember the bloke I told you about who accosted me on Whitehall to accuse me of being in cahoots with satanic paedophiles, which was really the true source of all of the COVID-19 stories. And I looked into his eyes and thought, you actually believe this? It was scary. But that was just some random on Whitehall. Imagine if it was your mum or your nan or your best mate or your husband or your boyfriend or your wife. And that's what we'll do. 0345 6060 973. Shelley's in High Wycombe to kick things off. Shelley, what would you like to say?
Hello. Very nervous, actually. I didn't realise I would be.
It's only me.
My cousin, my aunt and my uncle had fallen victim to the conspiracy groups quite early on, before COVID.
Okay.
And they'd sort of been looking at all of these sites. And unfortunately, during lockdown, my cousin went even further into these sites.
Right.
And I think the being so insular, they missed out on seeing the rest of the world. And he went down the rabbit hole that he thought that they didn't need the vaccine.
Yeah.
They could just have vitamin D. That would sort of support my aunt because she was diabetic.
Oh.
That they would be absolutely fine. And then he caught COVID and she caught COVID. And the last time I spoke to her was actually to tell her that my father had died. And within 3 weeks, she was dead. And it was all because of these conspiracy theories.
Oh, Shelley. I'm so sorry.
That's right. It was a very traumatic time, obviously.
Oh.
But these people, they just lose themselves. I mean, my cousin and my aunt, they are some of the loveliest people in the world,
right.
But they just lost themselves in this world of.
So your cousin was the. Choose my words so carefully. I'm so sorry for your loss. But your cousin essentially took his mum with him down these rabbit holes, as it were. Is that right?
Yeah, all of them did.
There's more than one. It's the whole family, is it?
Yeah,
more than one, so cousins plural. And
Yeah,
how did they
they'd all
respond
been
when they lost
very
their
open to
mum?
it.
When their mum died of COVID, how did they process that?
They just went into shutdown. I did even urge them to keep getting the vaccine, but they just sort of shut down for a while. They have become more open and less insular, but
right.
I'm not entirely sure what their views on vaccine are anymore. It's got to that point where we all have to stand together because we lost so much.
Yes, of course.
You don't kind of want to raise the question anymore.
It's just like that Fawlty Towers episode, isn't it? Don't mention the war. You're just going to leave it because you've got to get through stuff together. Oh,
yeah,
boy.
and
Well,
I remember being very angry at her at the time for not getting vaccinated because she always got her flu vaccine. But obviously these sites they convinced her that it was just somebody was trying to trick her. They were trying to, I don't know, put a microchip in. I honestly don't know.
Well, that is, I mean, oddly, Danny in Liverpool texting while you're talking, saying my brother started talking about the COVID vaccine and how a microchip from Bill Gates will be planted inside you. No amount of talking to him about this crazy theory could persuade him otherwise. A year later, he caught COVID, and being unvaccinated, he became seriously unwell and died from underlying health issues on January the 8th this year, aged 54. It's no laughing matter, Shelley, is it? There's a tendency to start talking about tinfoil hats and almost mocking the ridiculousness of these people, but it's not.
They're very intelligent people. They do their research, but when they do their research, they're dragged into these kinds of almost cult-like groups. And it's how do you get yourself out of it? Because it becomes, as you said, that downward spiral. You get into one, it leads you to another, and you start questioning constantly. If you've been a victim of something, you automatically blame whatever suggestion they provide. It's just horrible.
It is, and I'm so sorry for your loss. I really am. Doubly. No, thank you. 16, and I hope next time you ring me it's on a more cheerful topic. I really do. 16 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC.
LBC.
As you can hear, Michael's hard at work selling his car. No, really, he is. Because Michael's selling his car the motorway way. You see, while you're busy having a relaxing cuppa, Motorway are busy finding the highest offer for your car, as dealers compete to give you their best price. Plus, it doesn't cost you a thing to sell. And they collect your car from home for free. To sell your car, visit motorway.co.uk.
Do you have an energy smart meter? Now you can put your smart meter on your mobile with the Hugo Energy app. See your energy history and set budgets with Hugo. This winter, we are supporting the National Grid's demand flexibility service by sending Hugo users mobile alerts. So how does it work? Well, you can get a cashback for not using devices like washing machines at certain times. So let's unlock the power of your smart meter today. Search Hugo Energy app online.
At Intrepid Travel, we believe the best way to see a big world like ours is with a small group, like one of ours. With over 900 fabulous adventures to choose from, we think you'll agree. And because our emphasis is on socially conscious travel and having been carbon neutral since 2010, seeing the Earth with Intrepid Travel won't cost the Earth. Visit intrepidtravel.com and see where it takes you. Intrepid Travel. Travel is back. For good. Excludes flights to and from destinations.
Social media for a better world.
It's all good on We Are 8. Download the app for free and join us on We Are 8.
We Are 8. 15% of global deforestation is from toilet roll alone. But switch to Serious Tissues and they don't cut down trees. In fact, Serious Tissues plant a tree for every roll sold. Serious Tissues are carbon neutral. They're cleverly made from recycled paper in the UK. So instead of cutting down trees, you can plant a forest from your bathroom. Subscribe today for 10% off and free shipping at serioustissues.com.
My Weekend by Luke. Me and Mum go to the park if it's sunny.
Sadly, that's not what happens.
Mum's not the best at footy, but she tries.
She tries, but she's too ill to leave the house. Luke looks after her.
In the afternoon, my mate Abby comes over.
I'm Abby. I work for Bernardo's supporting families like Luke's. But every day, more families like his are struggling with the cost of living. Will you help? If we can change a childhood, we can change a life. Search Bernardo's to join us.
At Wix, get Dulux Standard 2.5 litre coloured emulsion. Was £20, now £15. Be house proud with Wix. Ends Wednesday. Terms apply.
If you need help staying on top of your bills, at Lloyds Bank, we're by your side. Every month, thousands of customers are using Spending Insights and are viewing their upcoming payments on our mobile banking app to help them feel more in control. And every day, in branch or on the phone, our colleagues are making a difference by talking customers through all the options available. Find out more at lloydsbank.com/cost of living. Lloyds Bank, by your side.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
20 minutes after 11. Do you think COVID-19 is a bioweapon released by sinister forces to further nefarious agendas? Well, then you are also more likely to now believe that the government is in touch with aliens. That's the opening paragraph to a fascinating little piece in the Times today about a report undertaken at the University of Pennsylvania that has explored the likelihood that believing conspiracies about COVID, believing crucially that the government has lied to you about COVID, violates your sense of trust in such a way that you start wondering what else they have lied to you about, and you can end up believing all manner of things, right up to and including the existence and the contact with aliens. 20 minutes after 11 is the time. Just wondering whether this is ringing any bells with you in your life, with your friends or loved ones. Gary's in Winchester. Gary, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James. I was a vaccinator for about 3 months last year, and I was talking to an anti-vax conspiracy theorist socially telling them what I was doing. And they were banging on about this being a conspiracy theory and that we were putting microchips into them every time we vaccinated.
Now, did he think you were in? Did he think you were in on that, or did he think you didn't realise what you were doing?
Well, unfortunately, I kind of fired the conspiracy theory in a joking way, which he took seriously, because I said that with each ampule that you have of COVID vaccination, you inject water into it to increase the volume, 1.8 mils. Then you withdraw 0.3 of a mil into 6 different syringes.
Right.
And I explained to him how difficult it was for me to make sure in the vial, and when I was using the syringe, that each time I withdrew the 0.3 mil, I had to make sure that I managed to get the microchip into the syringe to make sure that it did it.
Yes.
He believed it.
Oh.
He went on social media and said that he'd met a vaccinator who had admitted to ensuring that a microchip was in each syringe before I vaccinated.
That's doubly interesting, because quite a lot of it involved WhatsApp messages being forwarded around claiming to come from the niece of a well-known surgeon, or claiming that some things have happened here. And I remember, you've just reminded me, a pal of mine who sent me a WhatsApp footage. I've just dug it out again, forwarded many times. Do you remember when the phone mast started at the beginning, the 5G phone mast? That was entry level for it as well. What happened to your acquaintance? Do we know? Are they still?
He's still a conspiracy theorist, and he's still an anti-vaxxer, and I'm sure he believes that that we're controlled by aliens anyway. But from my point of view, it was hilarious but sad at the same time, because my joke inadvertently fueled his conspiracy.
But that's what's so interesting is that you know, some of the people doing it are doing it because they're bad actors. I mean, in some cases, literally bad actors, but also, you know, agents of badness. But that fellow actually believed you, and then he posted on Facebook, and as a consequence of your light-hearted quips, there'll be someone coming away from his Facebook page thinking that it's true. It's the desire to believe that separates us, isn't it? It's you know, it's that approach even to political journalism that Jeremy Paxson used to describe as asking, why is this so-and-so lying to me? Always being untrusting and waiting to be persuaded. Or I suppose they'd say, well, why do you trust all the doctors? It's just the same it's just the same as me trusting some bloke on Facebook claiming that he met a vaccinator who admitted that they do the microchip thing. Oh, boy. 0345 6060973 is the number if you want to grab the phone line that Gary is vacating. Lucy's in Cambridge. Lucy, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, yeah, I had a friend that obviously went down the kind of right-wing rabbit hole beforehand, and I think a few of us flirted with it here and there over the years.
Okay.
Well, some people did. When COVID
forgive me, I'm not being silly. What is the right-wing rabbit hole? Because it's not conventional right-wing. There's nothing...
You're right. I mean, just the free speech grift type stuff that was going on, like back in YouTube era, 2016, 2017.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And there was a few remnants from that. And I think the problem is that a lot of the people, the kind of grift right, if you will, they rely on the world ending, because otherwise what they're saying isn't going to ring true and people aren't going to keep giving them money. So they keep, like, every time there's a terror attack or some horrible thing happens. So they loved COVID. COVID was great content for them. So it was proof that the Matrix is real. This is stage 2. You know, now we're going to be all tagged and bagged, and there's going to be mass graves. And, so that was kind of the idea. So it gave a lot of people, including some of my friends, like this fire under them, where they would start interrogating members of their family. They would get in arguments all the time. They would interrogate me if I've had it. And it just got a bit insufferable. And then there was the freedom marches they were going to in London. With, like, Piers Corbyn and people like that. And David Icke was there.
And I mean, how do you I suppose I want to ask how you stay friends with them. Do you just avoid the subject even as they try to interrogate you? Do you try and rescue them? I mean, in cults, they stage interventions. But it's not a joke, is it? We just spoke to Shelley, whose aunt died.
That's the thing. Like, I thought it was all a bit tongue-in-cheek. Like, you are joking, right? Come on. You know, I had a friend literally say, I was X years old when I knew it was lizards. And it's like, okay. So it's very just deep ingrained. That's the thing. Like, there's not really much you can do. I had a friend that kept posting videos of himself, basically harassing people in the supermarket for wearing a mask.
Wow.
And when you watch it back, you think, how is this a win for anyone? You're just harassing members of the public and making a fool of yourself.
But it's a win because of the clicks, because of the numbers he gets for the videos.
He's not even getting big numbers. numbers. Do you know what I mean?
But other people,
Just being weird.
But other people are for similar sort of stuff.
It's probably a mental breakdown.
I mean, that day, I got accosted on Whitehall by someone accusing me of being something about Black Lives Matter that I can't remember, and another guy accusing me of being in cahoots with satanic paedophile.
They cling to these
They're
things.
both
You're
filming.
either with them or against them.
They're both filming me. So the plan, I think, is to get me to say something or to get cross, and then they put it on YouTube and they can monetize it, or they just get attention, which is what your friend was after, albeit that he didn't get much with his video.
Well, I did go to a Freedom March with an open mind, and I asked a couple of people what their plan was. Well, I thought, why not? I thought I'd go see my friends and see what all the fuss was about.
You should stay in more.
I know. But the overall feeling was tear down the government, government bad, power bad, everyone's a lizard. But no one really seemed to know what they wanted to do. They were just kind of having a rave, I guess. They just didn't know what they were doing. And I was like, right, well, I just don't, even if everything was true, I still don't trust this lot. Do you know what I mean?
I know, exactly. I know. That's how I felt about Brexit, actually. I mean, regardless of facts and understanding, just look at the lineup of people on that side of the argument and tell me why on earth you'd want to be in that team as opposed to the team that contains the people that know what they're talking about. But obviously the stakes are much higher on this sort of thing. And I think, Lucy, you highlight a really important point, which is that we don't take it seriously enough until it is, and Shelley's story haunts this conversation in many ways, until it is too late. You think it's just, oh, my mate's going kind of bit, it's all a bit weird. And the next thing you know, they're compromising their health and the health of people around them. Joanna's in Dumfries. Joanna, what would you like to say?
Hi,
Hello.
Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
My mother fell down the rabbit hole of COVID and the conspiracy theories because she's very much into alternative medicine, and she's very, very healthy. She's always been quite concerned about it ever since I was a child.
Right.
And I actually went to visit her. She lives in South Africa.
Right.
And she started on a rant about how society is going cashless and it's a way to control us. And she started talking about social credit.
What?
And that's
what?
Yeah.
I've seen. What is what's the master plan for this? So they're trying to eradicate cash. Why are they trying to eradicate cash?
To control people, because basically we went to quite a famous resort.
Yeah.
And it just started off because the lockers, you had to now do it online.
Yeah.
You couldn't just put a coin in and open the locker.
No.
So she started going on about a rant how this is the way they're going to control us because they're going to control our money and they're going to stop us from getting enough money.
I remember Farage once saying he'd never use his Oyster card because he didn't want the authorities to know where he was.
Yeah, but I kind of said so. But we've had credit cards for ages,
I know. Also, if you don't want to carry coins around in your swimming trunks, do you? How heated does it get? Do you say, "Mum, come on, give your head a wobble," or do you just let it slide for an easy life?
Well, I've had basically she phoned me when I was getting my vaccination.
Yeah.
Both times in the centre, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm just going to take the call. And she went on a rant about how I'm going to die in 3 years because
text 84850.
It is 11:36. Something weird going on in the House of Commons. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Nothing new there. Nadine Dorries was in the cabinet not long ago. No, but it's shut. No one's quite sure why. It appears that Penny Mordaunt hasn't turned up. If the Leader of the House isn't there, they can't proceed. I'm not entirely clear on the details, but I have instructed Theo Ushwood to find out what is going on, and he will be returning to the studio shortly with all the details, all the gen. Before that, a sad conversation in many ways, but a fascinating one. The number of people who sort of used COVID conspiracies as a gateway drug, an entry point for others. So you fall down one rabbit hole and it turns out you therefore become much, much more susceptible to the siren lure of other rabbit holes as well. I read some text, then we go to Amy and to Simon. Some people have safe words, Tom tells me, when their conspiracy theory loving friends start talking about this sort of stuff, so they know to immediately change the subject. Here's one. I see this quite a lot. Hi, James. I don't agree with either of the following, and I have one of each in my family, but is there really any difference between a conspiracy theorist and a devout believer in any religion? See, my gut reaction to that is, yes, of course there is, because I was very much raised in the Catholic faith, and I think everyone's relationship with religion and with God is deeply personal, but I still derive great comfort from elements of Christ's teachings, and indeed the cognitive dissonance of some of the beliefs that were drilled into me from a very early age. But I would have thought, to answer your question, that if I was to tell you not to get medical treatment but simply to pray, then your parallel works. So you can be a devout believer in a religion, but not choose that over science or evidence. It doesn't lead you into danger in quite the way that conspiracy theorists do. But the psychological principle is, I grant you, probably the same. And this from Googie. The incompetent Tories constantly gaslighting us doesn't help with people's trust in expertise. Also, religious indoctrination leaves people wide open for other conspiracy theories. 38 minutes after 11. Amy is in Newham. Amy, what can you tell us?
I'm a little bit nervous. It's the first time I've called in. I think my dad's probably listening.
Fantastic. Hello, Dad.
Most days. So I think that's a really important point, is around the sort of comfort that people find in this.
Yes.
The two people that I work in anti-radicalisation work, but I actually know two people who have bought into conspiracy theories, one very early in COVID and one actually quite recently, strangely, even though we've come out of lockdown. She's in Canada,
right?
So that's probably why. But I think the interesting point is around both of these individuals I would consider very educated people. One is someone I know from a background in teaching.
Okay.
And the other is someone who has a master's from Oxford, is a very big critical thinker. And I think it doesn't matter how educated you may be academically, there are ways that these conspiracy theories really tap into either your caring kind of nature or the kind of broader thinking outside the box, anti-establishment kind of ways of thinking. And I think both of those sorts of things have appealed to the two people I know. One, I know your previous caller mentioned sort of holistic health remedies.
That's
and things
often,
like that.
there's often crossover there, isn't there?
Yes, one being within that space. And I remember at the time she was posting things around Black Lives Matter, and I pointed out that alongside that she was posting QAnon content, which is linked to the far right.
Yeah, of course.
And she just couldn't see those parallels. And,
really?
There was, even through explanation, there was there was always a comment back, it's not far right, it's because we don't know the truth, they're telling us the truth, all of this stuff. And that's the real draw as well, as this kind of like clue finding element of these conspiracy theories. When things are uncertain, to be able to feel like you're part of something where you're making sense of the world is a big thing.
Yeah.
And I guess
so how do you start? I mean, you don't take your work home with you, so you don't try and de-radicalise.
No.
Okay.
No, and I wouldn't say that these two people have been radicalised, but it is a fine line. There is that fine line of it being a gateway to those things.
Yeah.
And the person that I know in Canada, she has now kind of gone down a rabbit hole of climate change denial.
Wow.
She posts probably 10 times a day on Facebook, and you see that behaviour in other spaces. I do a lot of work in sort of incel ideology, and it's that mass posting and I've got to get the message out, that's really worrying. These two individuals, one I still have on social media, the other, after I challenged her, she completely removed me from social media.
Really?
So I have no idea what she's doing now. I have no contact with her whatsoever. And I think, again, that's the worrying thing, is that isolation is, in sort of cases that we see, I'm not classing these people as radicalised by any stretch.
When would you, though? Because if you believe that there's a microchip in a vaccine, I would say you were radicalised, wouldn't you?
I guess there is that point. I'm thinking, in my line of work, we think about the sort of, violent threat to others. This can be a gateway to those spaces. And I think a lot of the people, like the people I know, don't realise that they are doing the work of more extreme groups by posting these bits of content, even if they think they're being caring. One buying into, originally she bought into the idea of the Save Our Children hashtag, which was I saw loads of people posting that on Instagram and on Facebook.
That's QAnon.
Yeah, and it channels that.
But there's always a little way in. This is crucial, isn't it? Because I think the idea, because some of the incels go in on men's mental health, don't they? Some of the grift, the top of the grift tree on that side of things say we're really concerned about men's mental health, and that sounds all right. You think, oh, that's nice. And then they suck you in, and the next thing you know, you're being schooled in vicious misogyny and all manner of other stuff. And this would be save our children. Who's going to argue with that? Save our children. Yeah. But then the point at which they say, who are they under threat from? And they say, a ring of satanic paedophiles who drink their blood in order to stay alive for long. And that's the bit where I break with comprehension, really. That's the bit where I just, hang on a minute. Don't be silly. Do you see what I mean?
And again, I think it taps into that idea that the individuals that I know are people who want to make changes in society. And so if they feel like, again, at the point in COVID, it was that isolated feeling. If they feel like they've got someone telling them they can help make a change or reveal some, exploitative group that they care about, then it does appeal. I just think it's interesting that the two people I know are people who have those kind of broader ways of thinking, but that's the thing that's led them into it.
Yeah,
even though I consider them very liberal.
Yeah, crikey. I mean, is there a type? That's the thing. I'm thinking there probably isn't. It could actually happen to anyone if the planet's aligned in the right way.
Yeah, and I think that's the case. And the work that I do, we always say there's no set profile for someone who's bought into any particular group. Yeah. If you catch someone at a point where they're confused or isolated, that's a real bonus for these groups or these conspiracy theorists. And I think that's the point that I would kind of summarise with this is the worry is, even though we don't have a pandemic, with sort of continued uncertainty around, cost of living and people's living standards, etc., it's still that breeding ground. If people aren't providing answers or responses or are a bit flaky, it means that these individuals will continue on that kind of path of finding answers elsewhere. That seem to. That's
the point, isn't it?
A bit more exciting.
Yeah, no, they are more exciting. We're back to my old line about the ghost train and the speak your weight machine. Which one's going to have the longer queue, the ghost train or the speak your weight machine? It's a rhetorical question, Amy. That was wonderful. I hope this doesn't sound patronising. I think your dad will be very proud of you, Amy.
Thanks.
Give him my regards. It's 11:45. I should read this out in the interest of balance. It's no surprise that James O'Brien is rubbishing conspiracy theories. James O'Brien is, give or take a few letters, an anagram of I am a lizard who is part of the New World Order, and one day you will kneel before me. Fact.
LBC. James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
11:49 is the time. Theo Ushwood is here. Panic over.
Yes, because we have a reason as to why Commons leader Penny Mordaunt hasn't turned up to deliver the business statement to MPs. And of course, the business statement happens every Thursday morning when the Commons leader sets out exactly what the government plans to do over the course of the next week in terms of introducing legislation. He or she also takes questions from backbench MPs about what they would like to discuss. It might be a small issue in their local constituency, or it might be the fate of the Home Secretary. She didn't turn up. The Commons had to be suspended for an hour. It is fairly unprecedented, I would say,
yes,
James.
I thought so.
It's very rare. It hasn't since I've been covering Parliament for more than 10 years, and it hasn't happened during my time covering politics. But she has a very good reason.
Yes.
It is an incredibly good excuse.
Go on then.
Because she is, of course, the Lord President of the Privy Council, and the Privy Council is meeting this morning with the King. In order to swear in the new cabinet members.
Oh, I see.
And she would be presiding over that.
King's diary would take precedence over everybody else's, so that would explain why it's an unfortuitous clash.
It's a completely but if you want to blame somebody, you could blame. If you wanted to blame somebody,
I'm not really into the blame game.
If you wanted to blame somebody, you could perhaps blame the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. He has taken quite a long time to appoint his junior front benchers into ministerial roles, and the Deputy Commons Leader the position hasn't been yet filled. And had it been filled, there would have been somebody to deputise for Penny Mordaunt.
Gosh. John Stevens, newly installed political editor at the Daily Mirror, has just tweeted, as I understand it, Suella Braverman's multiple breaches of ministerial code are using personal email to send government documents and sending government documents to an unauthorised person. That second one's quite a biggie.
That is a big one.
It's not going away.
John's reliable.
Solid. Thank you, Thea. 11:51 is the time. Back to the conspiracies and how one rabbit hole can lead to another. Danny's in Winchester. Danny, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm a vet, and for quite a few years we've been chatting about, talking on social media and campaigning on the what we call pseudoscience in veterinary practice, because it turns out there's a lot of owners who are also anti-vaccination, and they believe vaccines will harm their dogs, and there's they cause more damage than they do good, and same with this sort of move to go to raw feeding, where people think that pet food actually makes your animal sick and gives it cancer, and vets and pharmaceutical companies.
What's
make
the
more
win?
money.
What do they get out of spreading this stuff?
Well, it depends who's spreading it.
Yes,
I mean,
of course.
I think in general, a lot of people, a bit like the people you're speaking to who go down the COVID conspiracy route, they genuinely want what's best for their animals.
Yeah.
And I think one reason both people like human medicine and veterinary medicine end up sort of Googling and going online and then finding really dangerous sources of information is because they just don't have the time, with their vet or their doctor. So you go to the doctor, you go to the vet, they're running late, you get 10 minutes, you might have a few questions about how safe are vaccines, and the vet is like, okay, quick, jab the dog, get out, see you later, done a good job, But actually they didn't get a chance to have their concerns addressed, and they didn't have that personal connection with someone that they trust.
That's interesting. And then they go off in search of reassurance, and they find some very bad influences. While I've got you, is there a nationwide shortage of cat vaccines at the moment?
I think there was. I'll tell you what's a bigger problem. There's a massive nationwide shortage of vets.
Yeah, I know about that.
So,
that's Brexit.
It was about 80. Well, from up to about 2019, about half of new vets who register every year graduate from UK vet schools, and half were registering from the EU.
Yeah.
And of course, after Brexit, about 80% of those new registrations plummeted. But not only that, during the pandemic, it was a really good time for people to get dogs because they're at home all the time.
Yes.
So about 3 million new dogs. And the bigger issue is that when it comes to exporting animal products, whether it's cheeses, pizzas, hams, they all now need veterinary certification to go into the EU.
That's right.
And there's 95% of vets who are doing that kind of work and working in abattoirs who are EU nationals.
Particularly disproportionate number of Spanish people as well in that field, I think.
Yeah, Spanish and Greek. Yeah, they do a lot of public health and veterinary training over there.
Yeah, but on the other hand, mate, your passport's blue.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a
swings and roundabouts, Danny. Swings and roundabouts.
I tell you what's another problem, though, is that it's more difficult for animals who have pet passports to travel into the EU now. So people who want to take their dog to France or Germany, you have to fill out animal health certificate forms, which take ages. It takes about 3 hours. It's quite expensive. It's a real pain, and people are getting turned away.
And it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. But don't worry, because Jacob Rees-Mogg, any minute now, he's going to come up with the massive list of Brexit opportunities that he identified when he was Minister for Brexit Opportunities. It's not like he's got a lot else on anymore. I just want to steer you back, because I have a new kitten, and we've been told that we can't get any vaccinations. There's no vaccinations in the country until November.
Well, yeah, there's a whole load of reasons for that. I mean, a lot of them are manufactured outside the UK, and you've got supply chain issues on every level, whether it's transporting them, manufacturing, COVID delays as well as Brexit. It's a real problem.
I know, it's a scoop. I forgot that I very rarely stumble across scoops, Danny. I must alert Theo to look into this, because it's not been in the papers yet. It's not been reported, but there is a nationwide shortage of kitten vaccines.
Yes, there is.
Leave it with me. Leave it with me, Danny. I shall make sure that the people who need to know. Thank you. And he's absolutely right, by the way. Even I have run out of road when it comes to detailing daily all of the negative impacts of Brexit. But everywhere you turn, you'll hear stories like Danny's in the context of veterinary science. That reminds me as well, actually, that this week's guest on Full Disclosure is Noel Fitzpatrick, who... And I have to tell you, it's one of the most remarkable interviews I've ever conducted. I'll tell you a little bit more about it tomorrow, probably, but my goodness me, what an amazing man he is. Simon is in Preston to steer us back to the conspiracy theory. Simon, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi there, James.
Hello,
great
mate.
show.
Thank you.
First time I've ever called into anything, to be honest, because this is sort of, it's a subject that's completely broke my family, to be honest. So to hear, all the people calling in, it's... just good
What's
to hear.
happened? Well, you're not alone, are you? I suppose that's...
No. It is what it is at the end of the day. I, just carry on and look after my family. But so how did this all start? If I could go to the very beginning. It's a very complex story, but I'll compress it.
All right.
Quite simply, my mother and father, both in the 70s, my father was diagnosed with a condition where his white blood cells are slightly out of control.
Okay.
So I think it's something that happens in later life and can lead to leukemia, basically.
Right.
And it hasn't got to leukemia, but he's told if the white blood cells keep going out of control, he'll probably get leukemia. So anyway, as you probably would do, my mother and father went on the internet, which is probably dangerous for the pair of them, to be honest, but that's another story.
Yeah.
It led them to look into alternate therapies, basically, and a way to control this with herbs, seed pips, and all this type of stuff. And they ended up buying that and taking these, I don't know, some seed from some plant and what have you. But whatever on that one. But it basically led to a whole thing of anti-pharma. Okay,
right.
And don't believe in chemotherapy. Don't believe in
really,
all these type of drugs and all these type of things. You need alternate medicine. They talk about cancers and things like this as being just a fungus that you can control with orange pips or something. It's complete madness. Anyway, I really am sort of putting that very simply, but it's what it comes down to.
Sure, I understand.
So, like I say, this is multi-angled where it went from there. So as soon as you get into the anti-pharma thing, which this is years before COVID, it led to who controls pharma.
Right.
And it led into a whole subject of Jewish people are controlling everything, big pharma, all this type of stuff. And it's led to them being, I've never met such anti-Semitic people in my life. It's like, this is the angle it's going.
So you're looking over your dad's shoulder, are you, at some of the stuff he's coming across? Or you're just listening to the results of what he's been doing when he tells you stuff?
Yeah, they don't speak to me anymore because I've taken the vaccine and I'm much more liberal and all that type of stuff. Again, it is what it is.
I understand.
So it's the anti-Semitism thing lent to anti-immigration.
Right.
Because there's a belief in Jewish people trying to wash down the European community with other races. It's complete bonkers. Leads to a story about a man, the Kalugi theory, I think.
Yeah. This is getting rid of white people by, I can't remember, by encouraging them to fall in love with people who aren't white and have children, and that way they'll eradicate the white race or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I read upon it. It seems to be just a nice philanthropist, really. But anyway, whatever. So that's my take on it, rather than their dark take on it all. And that then led to major racism in the family, well, with them two anyway.
Yeah.
And it actually led then to people in the UK and MPs who, let's just say, for lack of a better term, pro-immigration, or just be nice to people.
Yeah. So your parents would start harassing them, would they, or contacting them?
Yes. So David Lammy, who I like, and I listen to his show, I think he sounds a lovely gentleman, really, in my opinion.
He is.
Led to them harassing him online in quite a nasty way. So that then led to a visit by the anti-terrorism police.
Oh, God.
So that's how dark it went, to be honest.
That is some domino, isn't it? That's the toppling from looking for some alternative medicine to help with his diagnosed condition.